So thank you all for joining, and we have about 30 minutes to explore building community, and we're really going to focus kind of less on online community and more on human relationships and human connection, and how do we support healthy, vibrant, in-person gatherings and meetups. Not just about kind of getting people together, but also things that create meaningful, transformative experiences. So that's what we're down for. And awesome. I hope to not say very much, because I think they're going to have a lot to say. But I will start us off. And maybe I'll start off, Heather, with you and the Burning Man experience. And I'm sure you've had multiple lessons of things that worked and probably things that didn't work. But I think something like 70 or 80,000 people now gather, and probably more if we could get tickets. So I'm wondering if you could say a few things just about what you've learned about what actually creates kind of meaningful human connections.
Ooh, of course, Burning Man is about 75,000 people in Black Rock City. That's sort of our flagship event. There's now probably a conservative estimate of 250,000 people around the world doing their own events and or community development. It is an experiment in tremendous success and tremendous failure, of course, both on a personal scale, not so much on the larger scale. We know what we're doing to keep it safe. It sometimes you might not know there's so much that goes into making a container. Yeah. But what we do is we provide a context, almost the last bastion for humanity to be free and to express themselves in a creative way. And this thing has arisen out of it with very little intentional ingredients mixed in. Now we've had to shape how do you define this so that other people can do it around the world? And we've now cultivated the 10 principles, which is sort of defined what people are experiencing while they're in this environment together in a way that lets them take it elsewhere. But this arose out of a bunch of people being together and being free. So what we've learned is provide the minimum viable construct and some communal expectations for how we're going to be together, and then let the magic happen.
Beautiful. And can you say a few of those 10 principles? You don't have to memorize all of them, but just to give us a sense of what.
I wrote them down, and then I forgot to put them into my boot. Yeah, certainly. We are one of the largest Leave No Trace events in the world. Okay. So what you bring with you, you take away. Radical self-expression in many different formats, be it how you look, or a song or a dance. Radical inclusion, immediacy, being present with each other and with the experience. And if somebody comes up to you and says, "Do you want to push the button?" you should always push the button, because there's bound to be some sort of explosive dragon or something that happens. Another interesting one is decommodification, which is a word that we've sort of coined, but we don't have vendors, we don't have sponsorships, though we are a nonprofit, so we're willing to talk. But it's not a place that people come to set up booths or to sell things. It's about what are you as a human being offering, what is your collective offering in an experience that is just coming from a place of gifting, which is another one of our principles. I could go on and on.
Beautiful. No, beautiful.
Yeah, that's a couple of the ingredients for certain.
Great. Konda, moving to you. I know you were instrumental in creating Impact Hub Oakland, but you've also been involved in other communities. What, from your experience, has helped to really nurture and build a community versus communities that don't really kind of bond together?
Yeah, what I'd like to talk about is I kind of would represent Impact Hub Oakland as well as the East Bay Community, East Bay Meditation Center, EBMC, in Oakland. Oakland in the house? Okay. Excellent. So both of those communities, both Impact Hub and both East Bay Meditation Center, the thread that links us is the notion of really creating inclusive, multicultural community. And that's what I feel like I've been really charged to do in this lifetime for some reason. And both of these institutions in Oakland have done a really good job of that. And I think that going back to your principles, and it's interesting, the guy earlier was talking about discomfort and uncertainty is really an important edge. There's also creating a safe container so you could be safe and discomfort at the same time. So they're not mutually exclusive. But what we've been able to do is really create a safe container, and a lot of that has to do with language and principles. We have multicultural agreements, we have principles, we have, at Impact Hub Oakland, we say radical belonging, radical inquiry, and radical connection. And so all of those things really happen there. And at East Bay Meditation Center, there's a whole nother list of really beautiful multicultural principles. And so what we've been able to do is really start something, both of them, with really inviting the community from the very beginning and having charrettes, not coming top down of what I think you want, but just allowing it to emerge. And so having ton of charrettes, which are, these charrettes are where you have stakeholders come and talk about different questions about what do they want, what is their needs in the space, and really allowing that to happen. And then also working very intentionally on language and on training people around multiculturalism is super important because we think we know and that the people are just going to show up. But without the right language, without the right space and the training and principles, it just doesn't happen comfortably. And so that's pretty much what we've done in those two spaces. And I would say in Oakland, even Oakland is a very diverse town, there's very segregated moments all over Oakland. But in those two spaces, it's not like that. In those two spaces, it's really everybody comes because they know that their voice is a major part of what happens there. And it's wonderful to see that take place. It's just wonderful. Even the discomfort, because that's where the growing edge is. I agree, that's where you grow. And people are willing to sit in it because they know that there's safety within the spaces. So,
that's beautiful.
And beautiful spaces as well. That helps, and inspiring spaces.
Great. Radha, do you want to say?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, we had an office at Impact Hub for Daybreakers. That's really cool. And Daybreaker was very much inspired by our experience at Burning Man in many ways, and wanting to come back to New York City, where isolation is rampant. There's a deep isolation happening right now. It's an epidemic. And we found that in New York, when we came back from this wonderful, radically self-expressed place, there was nowhere for us to let our hair down. So we'd go to nightclubs, and there'd be mean bouncers checking up and down. There'd be everyone on their cell phones, no one actually dancing. And it was a very sort of socially dark environment, especially, and also very masculine as well. So the idea was, what if we removed all the vices from nightlife and replaced it with the positive sides of life? So we replaced the bouncers with a hugging committee. We replaced the alcohol with green juice, coffee, and tea. We replaced the just sort of like the kind of the dark techno music with positive, bright music, and brought in all kinds of live horn sections and break dancers, and really invited a much more connected environment. And then did it in the morning at 6 a.m. on a weekday, which, by the way, y'all are invited. And the idea was, what if we danced and self-expressed and wore glitter on our face on a weekday morning before going to work? And what if we invited an intergenerational community, because it is a sober environment? So you can have little kids there, little babies there, come all the time. My twin sister was 9 months pregnant. The day before she gave birth, she came to Daybreaker and DJ'd with me. And we have Jane Goodall showed up unannounced and just kind of came and danced, probably doing a bit of a research on a new type of ape. But yeah, it's been a really wonderful experience to have this intergenerational community in these often siloed environments, and let people just fully let go. And we have an MC that we train, that we say, look, this is your opportunity to not just tell people to get low or move left or move right, but really help them let go of their judgment. So our MCs will say, stop judging yourself. This is a safe space. Just let go here. And we've quickly grown. In less than 4 years, we're in 23 cities around the world with a community of 500,000 people who wake up and dance. And it's been such a teacher for me.
That's amazing. So how do we, as a culture, I know loneliness is, as you probably know, is run rampant. More and more people are saying that they're lonely than ever.
Sure.
Even though socially we're more connected digitally, loneliness is still. And for me to actually show up at Burning Man, I went for the first time last year.
Finally.
It's uncomfortable. And when I go into different meditations, I used to work with different populations, and it would be uncomfortable. And to probably show up at 6 a.m. with a bunch of people dancing, and if I'm not a dancer, it would be uncomfortable.
You are a dancer.
I'm a dancer. Okay, I'm a dancer.
Everyone's a dancer.
So I'm wondering, it's like, how do we kind of extend an invite so that discomfort it doesn't become a barrier towards an experience that might actually be good for me, but I don't want to feel awkward. And so I'm wondering if we can begin to explore what is that invitation that we make. So at East Bay Meditation Center, how is that invitation set out so that if I don't feel like, oh, that's a stretch for me, because the more lonely I am, the more I just live in my bubble, right? So to step out of that bubble is not easy. So any thoughts on those invitations such that more people feel comfortable going through the door of a Burning Man or a meditation center or dance?
Absolutely. I can think of many. Do you want to go first?
Sure. It's interesting that we have an environment where almost anything can be used as a point of connection. Mm-hmm. And sure, I'm often in elaborate costumes, or somebody else is building a thing. They might be putting up a shade structure. And just even being curious about anything. I love your shoes. I love your costume. Do you need help? How did you do that? Like, there's so many micro moments for connection, and each one of those becomes something else. And the next thing you know, you've got a lifelong friend, or you've plugged into a group. So, especially if somebody's ever feeling awkward, if in doubt, ask somebody about their question or their shoes. You can get really far in just being curious about. People love to talk about themselves, so if they're doing anything interesting, ask them about it, and that becomes just a little micro icebreaker, and that you can build on that. It just builds a commonality right there.
Find something that you're curious about and follow that curiosity.
Yeah. Don't ever be afraid to be curious about something, especially if they've obviously spent an entire year building that project or working on that. They're going to be really excited to share.
Yeah.
And then you might have a lot more in common with them than you know about once you get past that first moment.
Yeah. Heather, I should also say, became good friends with my mom at a meetup because my mom has red hair, and you also had, I think, reddish hair, bluish hair at the time, and you guys connected around.
It was a while ago,
around that,
maybe.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on
sure.
supporting?
At Daybreaker, we've developed a method called the crawl method, and the crawl method. Crawl method for community building, and this method we've applied across the entire world. So the first the crawl is actually an acronym, and the C stands for defining your core values. So what are the core values for each and every community? So Mustafa's in the audience. He's our San Francisco producer. The nuances of San Francisco community is going to be different from our community in Tokyo, where Marie Kondo is from, and different from our community in Buenos Aires, and different from community in Amsterdam. So we really think about sort of who's our core community, what are our core values, and what are the constraints for each of these communities. The R in the crawl method is defining your rituals. So really having very thoughtful rituals so that when someone comes, it's like when you go to church or when you go to a football game, it's the jerseys, it's the chants, it's the huddles, right, that you really sink your teeth into. So the ritual of Burning Man and of Daybreaker, of all the things that we're, I'm sure, at Impact Hub as well. It's such an important part of what we all sort of strive to give to our community. The A in the crawl method is aesthetics. Aesthetics in this day and age is so critical. How things are designed, how do things look like, the container that you're inviting people into. How does that space feel and look? And the W is the why. Why are you doing this? Why are we the right leaders to sort of grow these communities? Why is this community going to be long-lasting? And that will sort of help define for the community why they would want to come as well. And then the L, which to me is really one of the most important parts of building communities, language. How do you tell the story? And Burning Man is very specific in how they tell their story. Daybreaker, we're very, very specific. We call ourselves millennial intellectual humor. So we have emojis and GIFs, but then we sort of throw in some really fun sort of scientific facts about the importance of dancing and what it does for your body. So this method is something that we've applied across the world, and it's been incredibly helpful for us. Yeah. Crawl method, yeah. Right. And the reason why it's called crawl is because you have to crawl. You can't run. You can't grow a community fast, and it's not like marketing where you can just have hockey stick growth. You really need to be thoughtful and evergreen. And we took them how many years? 30 years? 25 years to grow Burning Man?
Still growing.
Yeah, it's still growing. There you go.
All over the world.
That's what I'm saying, exactly. So it took you 30 years to really and it's thoughtful, it's intentional, and we really value that and respect and admire that. So yeah. So.
Konda, how about you?
Yeah, well, one of the things when I think about East Bay Meditation Center, for example, we have affinity group and affinity sits so that, the LGBTQI community, for example, right? It's like, how do I bring my queer self to meditation and really feel comfortable in the space? And so there's a sit for, there's times when we have those kinds of affinity groups, whether it's people of color, whether different bodied people. I mean, we have all kinds of different affinity groups that are really allow folks to come into the space and bring their whole selves. They're not bringing part of themselves. And that really, particularly when you're looking at meditation, you're really hoping, the idea is integration. Yeah. And you're able to find that integration in those kind of affinity groups. So that's super helpful. At the Impact Hub, we have food. Food is a big way that people come together, and we have a big feast every Friday, and big long table. The whole space turns into a big feast, and folks come and they sit next to each other, and we move them around, and people start to talking and eating, and over food, so much happens. Yeah. And so we really intentionally have a nice kitchen and where all the food is, and it really starts to bring people out, as well as we intentionally, when you come into the hub, we'll find out who you are, what it is that you do, and we may think, you should meet so-and-so. Because I think that might be a connection. And so we intentionally make connections, and they're brilliant. And it happens that way. And so some people come out of themselves just by meeting that one person, that they feel like they can relate to. So we make those intentional connections as well.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. So cool. And one of the things that seems to be an essential part of any community is that sense of generosity and people giving, not just taking. And I think one of the things I learned, one of the weirdest things I learned at Burning Man, I'm riding, I just went first time last year, I'm riding my bike, and there's people yelling at me to give me free things, free food. And I'm wondering, how do you cultivate that sense of they're not just looking to the leaders to if something's broken, they fix it themselves. There's this sense of us and this of shared responsibility. And we'd love to, of course, expand that into this entire culture that we're living in, but how do we create communities? I'm wondering, Heather, if you have some thoughts just on because if you tell people, listen, you all need to be responsible, you need to give away free food, they wouldn't do it, right? Because it's like a should. But if somehow this environment is created, then there's all this creativity to give in a way that supports the entity. Yeah. And I feel like things that I've been most drawn to somehow have figured out how to do that.
Yeah. Well, I can just say one thing about East Bay Meditation Center. The entire place is built on giving, on dana, which is you don't have to pay for anything. Wow. The entire thing is gift economy. We rely, and we're over 10 years old. We pay the rent. We have staff. We have all of that, and it's all on gift economy. And it's just based on, I think, people receiving so much goodness that they want to give back. They want to give back. I think that our inherent nature is generosity. Yeah. Our inherent nature is to give. Yeah. And it takes a flow, something to stop the flow for that not to happen. Yeah. So when you open up that gate and and allow the flow to happen, people give. Yeah. And so we've been able to stay alive all this time.
So Heather, I know some people they'll spend a month creating something free thing at Burning Man, and sometimes these people who create these things are tech founders but they'll spend all this time, they'll spend all this time just for that experience. What do you think is drawing and motivating that?
Well, radical self-reliance is sort of how we get people prepared to get out there, right? Because it's a desert, it's harsh, there's real challenges. And we do need people to be able to be self-sufficient. They can't just buy their meal, right? They have to have thought this through, taking responsibility for themselves as human beings. But then you couple that with gifting and participation and radical self-expression and set people free, and they've created this phenomenal environment. It's a place built by artists for artists, and if you weren't an artist when you walked in the door, you're gonna be one by the time you walk out. And then people are so personally transformed. Burning Man changed my life. It's the bumper sticker that we'll never make. And yet, we don't need to. I'm sure somebody's made it, actually, because they make their own swag. That's how great it is, right? people are so touched that then they almost instantly want to figure out what they can give. Sometimes at grand scales, to their own expense and to their own time, because they're getting so much from people who are giving of there. It becomes a giant show and tell, like the best sandbox, the best playground in the world, right? And you see other people have just given so much, and you've cried at a morning sunrise, or have seen the most beautiful piece of artwork ever, or just lay down some funky beats, or whatever the thing was, and then people instantly are like, I want to give back, because they've gotten so much and they want to contribute whatever they can offer, no matter how humble. And honestly, some of the smallest things are the most precious. It doesn't all have to be giant exploding dragons, but I like those too. So it really is when you are giving without expectation and then you receive without even seeking, and it just starts to propagate. And people, we give so much of ourselves to this. Sometimes we have to remind ourselves to sort of take a moment. But it's because people are so touched, and they want to get back to something.
I also think one of the things that Burning Man inspired in me, and we continue to sort of bring out to our individual cities, is play. I think what we've forgotten so much about in this world as adults is play. And I think that's really what I think also inspires that sense of wanting to give is you go to Burning Man, you're creating these cool things, you're dressing in costume. I know Eli and I, my partner, we're always like, okay, what's the fun gift we can give to Burning Man this year? Okay, what if we did this really fun sort of art car that had this little, that gave away popsicles, that had, it just, the playful side of life is what I think we're all craving. And play allows for that connection to be inspired. And so certainly at Daybreaker, one of the things that we always say is play is sort of the backbone of creativity and backbone of life and joy and service. And it's if service isn't fun, if giving isn't fun, if creating isn't fun, if it's not playful, then you wouldn't want to do it. It'd feel like work, right? So I think that's really what we want to inspire more in all of our major cities that we're in is people put on that sort of that professional outfit so much, and that kind of the I'm a professional, take me seriously, and our whole thing is let's take all that off. Let's put our hair in dreadlocks. Let's wear some fun clothes. Let's
Smile.
be silly. Let's smile more. And I think that's really what I think is the ultimate root of life.
So we have about 3 minutes left, which is like 1 minute a person. I would love to just get closing thoughts, and I'd love in particular is like because I feel like a lot of us feel like the world, it's just like going in two directions right now. On one level, it's just like it looks like there's so much hope and so much amazing things happening in women's marches. On other levels, it just seems like a more dangerous, chaotic, crazy world on the verge of a nuclear holocaust. And yet there's a divide that we need to, feels like there's a divide in the world, there's a divide in our culture, and community potentially is one answer to that, that like we step out into worlds that we might be uncomfortable in, but we don't just stay isolated. And so in 1 minute each, what is your vision for where we can go, and what are maybe one thing that you've learned that we can kind of practice on a daily level, whether even if we can't make it to each of these physical centers, what is one thing that we could kind of possibly embody that, so we're co-creating our culture?
Sure. I'm happy
Go
to go
for it.
first. Yeah, so I think there's a dance between online and offline. I think that to shun online as the bad guy and is actually a mistake. I think there's beauty in that, the Me Too movement, the One Less movement, the Ice Bucket Challenge. I think there's so many beautiful moments that happen online that can then sort of lend itself to an opportunity that you can have offline. So I think that trying to create that division between the two is a mistake. I think we need to learn the dance between online and offline, and I know Daybreaker wouldn't be where we are without Facebook groups, without growing sort of our online community, even without our partners. I mean, we work with some of the biggest partners in the world who they also want to figure out how to create community. For us to say we're not working with partners because it's not authentic is also a mistake. I think we need to all hold hands and say, hey, we can help guide you, brand X, and show you how to create authentic community in the real world. And it's not a sellout, we're buying in, right? And I think that's really what we all need to sort of, I feel like, embody more of, is that sense of, hey, we're all in this together. Let's not say these guys are the bad guys or these are the good guys. Let's just go in and all support one another towards a shared mission. So, that's I think what it is.
Yeah. I mean, I have to kind of ditto what you said. The online, I think, yeah, it's given a bad rap online, and the two are the way we exist today, and they're both important. And so being able to balance them and to be able to wherever the doorway is for you is fine, but because community is what's most important, connection. That's all we really want. All of us ultimately want connection. And when we can find that connection, whether it is online or whether it is in person, and like you said, a lot of the online leads to in person because it typically isn't enough, and to really have that one-on-one or that group kind of feeling, it's just wonderful. And so I believe that, I think we all can find out, really look inside ourselves, like what brings me connection? You know, everybody's different. What is it that brings me the deepest connection? And one begins with connecting with myself, first of all. It begins with understanding that I can connect with myself and not looking outward totally for everything, but really being able to connect with self. And that begins with, again, a practice, a spiritual practice helps to do that. And then being able to take that and take it out into the world.
That's beautiful, yeah.
I'll keep it quick. I, too, am sort of platform agnostic. I really encourage people to go for quality over quantity of connection. And I think something that's very important is to practice being with each other in constructive ways. Helping your neighbor move or build a deck or working on a project and putting your energy into something together constructively and finding every opportunity for those little micro connections, because those create friends, that creates community, and that creates resiliency. And that's what we need as humans, is to fall back into that resiliency and that community when things get hard or real or divisive, and to really hold on to every little connection we have to help us get through that.
Beautiful. All right. Thank you so much.
I'm doing Q&A today, too.
Our time is up.
And we're doing a breakout, too, right?
Yes. Oh, and they are going to be, Radha's leading a breakout, and they are going to be in the Q&A room after lunch. So if you have questions for them, you can meet them there.
Great.
Thank you again.
Yeah.